right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. This is the Millstone Report. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, we cannot do the program without you watching every single day. My name is Paul Harrell, and we are glad that you are with us. We got a great show. We're going to talk. Some eschatology. I don't know if anybody saw the Tucker Carlson show with Andrew Isker, Pastor Andrew Isker. It was certainly a fantastic episode where. They talked a lot about the Bible, a lot about Jesus Christ, and they talked about eschatology, dispensationalism versus the, predominant beliefs, for the first 1,800 years of the church. That was certainly fascinating and interesting to think about how these ideas are getting out to more and more people. Also, we're going to talk about these activist judges. Obviously, the fact that the judiciary continues to thwart essentially the 2024 election with all of these injunctions, national injunctions. We'll talk about that, as well as Tren de Agua and MS-13, these gangs, these violent gangs that have been part of what we now know is a proven systemic invasion that was not only enabled, but it was an active plan to register, to give people Social Security numbers. Elon Musk exposed this. To give people Social Security numbers to register them to vote. We have, according to Musk, they did in fact vote in just the limited sample sizing that was done by, the Doge apparatus. And now the media, now that these mass deportations, that's what people voted for, by the way. And there's some criticism on the right that the deportations aren't going far enough, but at the bare minimum, what was promised in the election was the mass deportation of violent criminals, of violent, illegal, alien criminals, many of them part of these gangs, whether it's MS-13 or Tren de Agua, or I'm sure there's other gangs as well out there. And so at a bare minimum, this is clearly what the American people voted for. Now, there are now, the media is now painting these people as victims. They're painting gang members, violent gang members, the type of people who were affiliated with gangs that murdered people like Lake and Riley. They're now trying to paint them as victims, and they're being denied due process. And I know there's reports of people getting swept up that have no business being swept up. But I think it's very clear the situation right now. We have been under an invasion. We have been under an invasion, a calculated battle plan to destroy this country, and the administration is trying to do something about that. And so let's get right into it. CNN taking the biggest... before we do anything else, I want to tell you that this portion of the program brought to you by Red Vive Health and the great folks over at redvivehealth.org. Go over there now, redvivehealth.org/Paul. Check out their red light panels. We'll tell you more about them here in a little bit later in the program. But let's get right into it, shall we? This is the CNN clip between an entire panel, basically, and Scott Jennings, who is habitually the lone voice of reason. They're very upset that legal immigrants are not being given due process. The idea being that the second you get across the border as an illegal alien, that you can't just be deported, that you now have to have due process. And Jennings takes exception to that. And let's just take a listen.
Believe that in a constitutional democracy like the United States of America, where it's supposed to be...
So apparently Joe Rogan said it was horrific if innocents are wrapped up in the deportations and wind up in a El Salvadorian prison.
Guaranteed that we are having to rely on information based on an administration that does not have a good relationship with the truth. They're not even willing to provide the judges who are part of these cases with the documents to prove that some of these individuals actually either did have due process or had been found to be criminal gang members. And let's be very clear. I don't think anybody at this table wants criminals in this country who are murdering children, who are hurting people. I think that's we can probably go baseline there.
Probably
but what
not,
I think
though.
We have to ask ourselves is, if you believe in a constitutional democracy, do you not want your president to follow the law? And by the way, in our own CNN poll, A vast majority of Americans said they're concerned and want to see Donald Trump follow the law.
Scott, isn't this exactly what we denounce other countries for doing? Not giving our own citizens, when they get wrongfully detained around the world, our own citizens the due process that they deserve?
Well, I think multiple things could be true. Number one, I delineate between American citizens and everyone else. If you're a U.S. citizen, I put you in a different category.
On due process, that's not a distinction that the law makes,
Then if you've come here and broken our laws and committed violent acts or murdered and raped and whatever, I put you in a different category.
When it comes to the law and due process, that is not a distinction.
Well, if you'd like to argue that Trinidad should have the same rights that you get as an American citizen, go ahead.
I don't change the Constitution.
Hold on a second. The argument is
you're saying that a terrorist can walk across the border and become effectively a U.S. citizen?
That's not what I'm saying.
Hold on. Scott, look at me. Okay.
Yeah, let's give the host
you and I are
talking.
talking.
Being taken to the Longhouse. Longhouse alert.
What I'm saying to you is that the law does not make a distinction between U.S. citizens and everybody else when it comes to being accused of crimes. Are you saying that that should not be in place? That if you happen to not be a citizen, you get to be thrown into a jail with no process at all?
I'm saying that these people are effectively terrorists. They walked across our borders illegally.
Okay.
They are violent. I don't really want them here.
But doesn't the government have to prove that they are who they say they are?
Correct.
That's
all we're saying.
That's all.
I mean,
you can say it
eventually,
it's not a concession that you like Trinidad and Tobago. It's just a question of the basics of civics in this country.
I think eventually the government will have to show all of its cards on everybody that they have detained, deported, or done anything to in this arena. But there is no doubt that the Trump administration is rounding up effectively terrorists who came across here illegally, committed horrific acts, and do not need to be in this country.
All right, so, a couple of things come to mind here. We really are, there's just a real, quite frankly, it's a lack of a war mentality. I mean, if you see this as the open border, the plan, the coordinated plan to destroy the country demographically, to register these people to vote, and essentially a color revolution, communist take. If you see it as a war against the American people, then the stuff that you're willing to do in war, and it also comes to the fact that this is not a formal nation state, right? A formal nation state declaring war and then invading our country. This is once again, though, the media they have no idea. Well, they do, quite frankly. They do. They just are apologizing for the violence, not to mention just the outright theft of government benefits. And we knew this was coming. We knew this was coming when you had Christianity Today, right? The woke Christianity Today publication putting out, to their reporters, hey, if you see any sob stories, we want them. And anything you see about people being arrested off the streets, we want them. We want to make much of this idea. And so we've known that this was going to happen. We've known this was going to be the tactics for a very, very long time. And so we are certainly in the midst of again, what did you vote for? Mass deportations are what people voted for. I think the deportations are not going fast enough. But at a bare minimum, we were told that it would start with violent lawbreakers, people who are criminals. And they are criminals just by their very nature of being here illegally. William Wolf from the Center of Baptist Leadership writing, just Google MS-13, or better yet, grok it. They are one of the most violent illegal alien gangs in the U.S. drug trafficking, rape, senseless murders, you name it. And overnight, the media decided that they are the real victims here. Bold strategy. Let's see how that works out. William Wolf says, yeah, I support due process for illegal aliens. They are due to be processed immediately out of the country and never brought back. So we also are failing to grasp the whole concept of, and that they've been trying to do this forever when, they don't want you to use the term. This was back when, the late Lou Dobbs was on the air every night preaching this, when they changed the terminology from illegal aliens to illegal immigrants to undocumented immigrants. And then, of course, we've got a lot of big evangelicals. They're making hay over this. And he says that, again, William Wolf, Big Eva cares more about MS-13 gang members getting deported than they did about Laken Riley getting murdered by an illegal alien. We also have a judge dismissing a case against a man because he was detained by ICE mid-trial. And actually he's found an ICE agent in contempt. So this is in Massachusetts. A state judge in Boston has dismissed a case against a man who was taken into federal custody in the middle of his criminal trial last week, citing prosecutorial misconduct, and found a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent in contempt. Judge says this is disturbing. So they had this guy on criminal charges. You know, he was being prosecuted. His name is William Martel LeBron, but he was detained by ICE agents outside of the courtroom on Thursday after the start of his jury trial on charges of providing false information on a license application. Somerville had held an emergency hearing on the matter Friday where he ordered ICE to return Martel LeBron, who's now being held in federal custody in Plymouth, to the court to stand trial on Monday. The defense attorney, Murat Erkan, on Monday called what happened obstruction of justice and alleged a plan involving the state to deport Martel LeBron. Erkan said that all it took was an email for ICE agents to show up at previous hearings, yet they ignored the order to appear in court Monday. During the hearing, Somerville repeatedly overruled objections and threatened to throw out the lawyer for the assistant district attorney, Jack Lucy. Lucy was called as a witness where he admitted that ICE agent Brian Sullivan shared his intention over the phone the day before the trial to take Martel LeBron into custody. Lucy said he met with Sullivan and two state troopers during a break the next day, and Sullivan said they would take him at the end of the trial, but that didn't happen. They showed up and they took him. This is just going to be another kind of example of the tension that we have with these leftist blue states and the Trump administration and what they're trying to do to deport criminal illegal aliens. So that's and then we have the judges. Let's move on to the judges. We've got this from yesterday. A federal judge named Edward Chen in San Francisco has now blocked the Trump administration from ending TPS, or temporary protected status, for 350,000 Venezuelans in the U.S. right now. Their work permits and protection from removal was set to be terminated next week. So we have another judge interfering. Now, our friend Charles Haywood from the Worthy House has an interesting take on this. He writes, the main check on district judges issuing bogus injunctions used to be fear of being overruled. If a circuit court overturned you, you were humiliated in front of the profession. Now, though, judges are instead celebrated by the people whose good opinion they crave for acting totally outside the law and are therefore indifferent to being reversed on appeal. In fact, they celebrate it as evidence they are resisting and a part of the good guys. This is an unstable situation, though an open constitutional rupture might yet be avoided if circuit courts quash all these decisions quickly. That has already happened in a few cases, but it has to happen immediately in all, or Trump will have to take more decisive action to force the issue. The fault of all of this, of course, lies at the feet of the left, which could not resist using the tool of the judicial tyranny to accomplish what they could not do democratically. Yeah, I mean, if in my opinion, the whole, and we talked about this before the election, you know, the idea of constitutioning harder, people have made these points. But, I mean, it is just, to me, an objective fact at this point that the Constitution isn't worth the paper it's written on because it hasn't been really in effect. It hasn't been the governing law over this country for so long now, right? I mean, it's just been thwarted and thwarted and thwarted by the judiciary to the point now where people talk. I was listening to, actually on the way into work, I was listening to Glenn Beck this morning railing about, he was on the radio, railing against this idea of Trump, you know, saying he could get a third term. I know Steve Bannon has talked about how it could happen. There's people saying that, you know, like Vance could run for president and pick Trump as his running mate, and then Vance could resign, and then Trump is unable to get a third term. And this has got people worked up. I don't really care. But all he was talking about, Beck was talking about the Constitution, your principles. And I'm just sitting there thinking, this is just so tired and boring at this point because it only goes one way. The Constitution only matters when the leftists say that it should matter. The Constitution never matters when the right says it should matter. And as somebody who's, you know, I'm 40 years old, I've grown up seen this happen. I've seen this happen, and it doesn't. And I used to be the guy. Look, I mean, I generally speaking, like the Constitution, think it's a great document. Love America, love our country, but we have been in the midst of basically a soft, communist takeover for most of my life when it comes to that document being ignored time and time again. And so when we had Jeff Younger on the program a couple of weeks ago, he said at this point, if you even want, and feel free to disagree with this, but the idea being if you even want the hope of getting back to some sort of constitutional government that's limited, you're going to have somebody that basically winnows your political enemies to the point where their ideas are run out of town on a rail. And in order to do that, you may have to ignore these judges. Now, we have Senator Kennedy from Louisiana. Oh, here's another one. Breaking, a federal judge has blocked the Trump administration from firing any CIA or DNI employees who worked on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So here's another incursion. And so when you look at what they're trying to do to prevent deportations, when you look at what they're trying to do to prevent the reformation of these intel oligarchs, these judges are literally threatening the safety of this country. They are threatening the safety of average Americans, specifically with the illegal aliens and, essentially the third world invading this country, barbarians. Here is Senator Kennedy. Elon Musk posted this from Wall Street Apes. In a hearing, talking about how these judges actually don't have a statutory or Supreme Court precedent leg to stand on. Listen to
Senator,
this.
a universal injunction is what we call an order from a court enjoining the government in a way that goes beyond the parties to the case, but applies nationwide or in some cases universally to enjoin the government.
Is it sometimes referred to as a nationwide injunction?
Yes, it is, Senator.
What's the statutory basis for a federal judge issuing an order that affects people other than the parties before the court?
I'm not aware of a statutory basis, Senator.
There is no statutory basis, is there?
No, Senator.
What's the United States Supreme Court opinion which interprets the Constitution in a way that allows a federal district court judge to do this? Can you name me that case?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
There isn't one, is there?
I'm not aware of one, Senator.
Explain to me how this works. How can a federal judge issue an order that affects everybody else other than those in front of him or her? How is that possible?
It shouldn't be possible, Senator, but district courts do it all the time. I think on the theory that the courts need to enjoin a federal policy from going into effect, and they often will enjoin it as nationwide, so all non-parties are protected by that injunction.
I thought that if you wanted to affect parties who aren't in court, you had to file a class action.
That's correct, Senator.
So why don't the federal judges, instead of issuing a universal injunction with no legal basis, tell the plaintiff, look, you got to go file a class action if you want to impact parties who aren't subject to my court?
Senator, the Department of Justice makes that argument all the time in our briefs. I think in many cases, class actions would be inappropriate. They would.
So, yeah, they wouldn't qualify for a class action. The whole thing is, they're playing for the other team. They're playing for the other team here. Now, and what we covered yesterday with the attack on Tesla. By the way, I'm sitting down later today with Jacob Holloway where we're going to record something. Jacob Holloway is a Tesla owner, and he's essentially, driving around in a Tesla, and his life is in danger. That's where we are right now. So Derek Evans, writing about conservative activist Asra Nomani, has now compiled a list of 24 Democrat organizations with a budget of $124 million that are behind the Tesla takedown campaign of terrorist violence. She scraped the protest details from Action Network and Mobilize, which are two platforms promoting the Tesla takedown protests, aligned with the Democrat Party. And then she built a public database of the groups behind the Tesla protest. You have this group named 5501. Mission is protesting anti-democratic and illegal actions of the Trump administration. The reason this is relevant is because you had Musk yesterday saying that you can't just prosecute the vandals and the violent actors at the protests. You're going to have to go after. He was urging the Trump administration to go after those who are actually funding these massive operations. You know, people like George Soros, who is obviously he's done this in the past, obviously suspected of paying for these protests to happen. Action Network, Action Fund Network. Anyway, this is an extensive list of the people who are being funded, and they're behind getting these protests. You know, paying the protesters to show up to create media headlines. Pam Bondi came out yesterday and said that they have filed charges against somebody named Cooper Frederick, who firebombed a Tesla dealership in Loveland, Colorado. Listen to this.
I've made it clear, if you take part in the wave of domestic terrorism against Tesla properties, we will find you, arrest you, and put you behind bars. Today, I'm proud to announce that the Department of Justice has unsealed federal charges against another Tesla attacker. We've charged Cooper Frederick in the firebombing of a Tesla dealership that occurred on March 7th in Loveland, Colorado. All of these cases are a serious threat to public safety. Therefore, there will be no negotiating. We are seeking 20 years in prison. The crime was committed in Colorado, and thanks to the great investigative work by the FBI, the defendant was arrested in Plano, Texas. Let this be a warning. You can run, but you cannot hide. Justice is coming.
Yeah, so, again, this is an individual case, which obviously needs to be prosecuted, but the people who are funding it are the ones that need to be taken down. That much is clear to me. Now, moving on, and we're moving kind of quick here because I really want to get to this Andrew Isker, Tucker Carlson situation. It was a fantastic podcast where they made much of Christ, and I want to talk about that here in a minute. But before we get to that, yesterday we told you about Marine Le Pen in France, how she has now essentially been charged. She's been convicted and barred from office. They're saying that they're going to put her in prison for 2 years. Here's Donald Trump responding to this, what happened to Marine Le Pen over in France.
Marine Le Pen, the far-right leader, got convicted in court and is now banned from running for office for 5 years. Do you have a comment on that?
That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. I know all about it, and a lot of people thought she wasn't going to be convicted of anything, and I don't know if it means conviction, but she was banned for running for 5 years, and she's the leading candidate. That sounds like this country. That sounds very much like this country.
He's exactly right. William Wolf, once again, we're featured a lot of his tweets today. He says, can you imagine if Putin won the war in Ukraine and democracy died in Europe? They might begin doing terrible authoritarian things like jailing political opponents and censoring free speech. Here's a headline, Marine Le Pen barred from running for French presidency in 2027. We go over to Moldova. Moldova to ban pro-Russian party members from running for election. Then we have a headline out of Germany. Germany's far-right AfD party expelled from European Parliament group. And then another over in Romania, far-right front runner blocked from Romanian presidential race. Once again, pointing out that these values of Europe are actually the question we always ask: who are the godless communists of today? Who are they now? Europe resembles the godless communists of the old Soviet Union, more so. I mean, it's incredible. They literally have become. They have the values that NATO was formed to fight against. Christian Europe. We're supposed to protect Christian Europe. That's what NATO was for. And now Europe isn't very Christian. And lo and behold, Europe is no longer Christian, which means they've become totalitarian freaks, from where I stand. In another comparing this, people say Putin is a dictator. Meanwhile, in Europe, again, France, Marine Le Pen sentenced and barred from running for elections. Romania, elections were canceled there. The winning candidate was arrested and imprisoned. Germany, preparations for similar scenario again in the AfD party. Then you go to Slovakia, the assassination attempt against the anti-war prime minister there by the name of Robert Fico. In Hungary, they continue to tax on Orban in pressure to exclude Hungary from European Union decisions. And then in Estonia, 25% of Russians have been barred from voting in the elections in the country of Estonia. Unbelievable. Elon Musk says that someone will be arrested tomorrow for stealing 400,000 Social Security. You know, Musk has also said that there was a lot of deleting that went on before Doge got in. They deleted a bunch of financial crimes. I saw that before we came on, but I don't have that tweet. But he says that the Doge team has uncovered it, and that the people in the government who deleted these financial crimes did not understand technology well enough to really, I guess they didn't call Hillary Clinton in the bleach bit. But here is Musk claiming that somebody's going to be arrested soon with this Social Security fraud.
In fact, I believe someone is going to be arrested tomorrow. This is someone who actually stole 400,000 Social Security numbers and personal information from the Social Security database, and was selling Social Security numbers and all of identification information in order for people to basically steal money from Social Security. And this is like, by the way, a particular avenue of fraud for like illegal immigrants and for voter fraud, because the main way that identification is established in the United States is via Social Security. So if you compromise the Social Security system, you can basically get people to get de facto registered to vote, even if they're not citizens, and to get a bunch of benefits and to milk the system. It's pretty insane. Like the Democrats basically taken every part of the government that could possibly be bent towards providing financial incentives for illegal immigrants to come to and remain in the United States, whether it's Social Security, disability, Medicare, unemployment, even like IRS refunds without any income. It's wild. The helping Americans in distress from natural disasters to pay for luxury hotels in New York.
Yeah, you know, all that came out after the hurricane hit East Tennessee and North Carolina. Just incredible. And again, the huge story yesterday was at that Wisconsin rally. By the way, Larry Schweikart says that the Republican turnout in Wisconsin is looking good. We'll see what happens with that Supreme Court race. But the big news is at that Wisconsin rally, they detailed that, you know, there was a systematic policy in place to register illegal aliens to vote, to give them Social Security numbers, to give them maximum benefits, to give them IRS refunds with no income, and then register them to vote. And they had said that they did, in fact, vote. All the conspiracy theorists, everything we've been saying for 20 years about the border situation and the Democrats and the Uniparty, really, wanting a new permanent underclass was correct, or cheap labor. Conspiracy theorists were right once again. Before we go any further, I want to tell you about Red Vive red light panels. Why do you want to use red light therapy? Well, because I believe it's the future of medicine. I have the panel on the right there, the Red Vive 300. You've got two options here. I want you to do your own research, of course, but this medically, scientifically, this literally is, it's like a catch-all to end your, if you've got chronic pain, this can help over your entire body. If you want to recover from workouts faster, this can help. If you just want to get better sleep, this can help there too. We're talking about stimulating the mitochondria at the cellular level, which is what makes cellular respiration possible. Isn't that right, folks? You guys remember Biology 101. But we're not just talking about red light. It's important to remember this is red light and near infrared light. These are two different wavelengths naturally emitted by the sun, but it's in targeted doses. And you can have one or the other, but if you want a quality red light panel, meaning you can turn one on, you can turn the other on, or you could have them both. I use both at the same time. There's a convenient timer on the side, and you sit there and you just absorb the light, and you feel incredible after. And this is just good for your overall general health, but it can also help with your, chronic illnesses as well. These panels emit both. The red light is good for your skin, increase collagen. Ladies, it can make you look younger. And then the near-infrared light is what actually penetrates to your organs and your bones, your muscles, your tissues. And that's where you really see and you feel the difference, the energy levels. It's incredible. So it's the healing power of light, and I want you to go now to Red Vive. For those of you listening and you're not watching, it's VIVE, redvivehealth.org/Paul, and check out their 0% interest financing that is available for these panels. These are clinical strength panels. You might find them in a chiropractor's office. You can have them in your own home. Lighting your path to wellness, the folks at Red Vive Health, I'm proud to partner with. I highly recommend these panels because they work. All right, moving on now. This is an interesting... So Mike Huckabee, the former governor of my home state here in Arkansas, Mike Huckabee has been tapped as the ambassador to the nation-state of Israel. I think his confirmation hearing took place sometime last week, and it got a few Christians' attention because of what he said about Mormons. He was asked a question from a senator from Utah about Mormons, and the Christian Post has this headline: Huckabee calls Mormons, Christians, Jews people of the book at Senate hearing. Now, to evangelicals, this was a little bit of a double take moment, because many evangelicals believe that Mormonism is not Christian and is in fact a cult. That's what many people believe. I don't believe Mormons are Christians. So let's see here. The exchange began when Senator John Curtis of Utah said his home state has a very special relationship with Israel. Responding to the question from Curtis about his feelings toward the LDS, Huckabee, a former Southern Baptist minister, said, quote, "The respect I have for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is extraordinary because I respect very much the commitment to family, to moral righteousness, and to a sense of right and wrong." And then he tied this admiration to his view of the state of Israel, noting, quote, "Israel in many ways is a reflection of our own heritage and history," he said. Then he said, "It is the Judeo-Christian law that there is a right and wrong, that there's a right and there is a wrong upon which all Western civilization is built, but certainly our system of government." And then he said, and then Christian Post writes, while some Protestant pastors believe that Mormonism is akin to a cult, Huckabee appeared in the hearing to equate the religious beliefs of Mormonism with Protestant churches and Jewish synagogues. So when I read this, I immediately thought back to our coverage of what happened at the Georgia State House last week, where Pastor Jeff Durbin goes to a committee hearing in Georgia to try to pass an equal protection bill on abortion, essentially saying, look, a life is a life at conception, at fertilization, and they need to have the same equal protection that a baby does outside of the womb. Effectively, what it would mean, it would criminalize abortion, because it would be murder, because that's what it is. And there was the only Jewish state representative in Georgia took exception and said that her religious freedom and her religion of Judaism teaches her that abortion is fine, and that it's good for. Obviously, she said that that she has the right under her religious freedom to have an abortion, and I'm paraphrasing here, whether her life is at risk or whether mentally and psychologically she and her rabbi and doctor deem that it would not be good. Which highlights, because of course she's talking about what the Talmud teaches, which is not a piece of literature that has anything in common with biblical Christianity. And this interaction really sent shockwaves across a lot of different mediums. But what it did, and we talked about this at the time, it really highlighted an actual chasm. We talk about what's right and what's wrong. What was on display at the Georgia State House actually highlighted quite a chasm, quite a Grand Canyon-sized chasm between biblical Christianity and modern-day Judaism. And so we talked about that. But specifically, there's a fact here that dispensational Zionism is baked into America's foreign policy. We all know this. And yesterday on Tucker Carlson's show, he interviewed Pastor Andrew Isker. And it was a fascinating, absolutely fascinating exchange between these two men. And they actually talked about dispensationalism for a long time. I'm going to camp out here because we're going to listen to this, and I'm going to kind of dissect it as I go. But it was a fascinating discussion. So here is Andrew Isker. He's a former Minnesotan who has moved to Tennessee because of the essentially totalitarian anti-Christian policies of Minnesota. He had to move his family out of Tennessee because they have policies there where they can take your kids if you don't affirm their pronouns. But here they are as the discussion begins to talk about eschatological views, the different eschatological views that are out there about the end times, the rapture, when Christ is going to return, so on and so forth. Take a listen.
Well, actually, it's sort of attractive to have this eschatology where everything is coming to an end, right? You can understand why people would eat that up. But the people that actually built America, right, the Puritans and all of the settlers of this country, you think of even like the founding generation, that theology did not exist yet. That wasn't until the middle of the 19th century that it came into being. Like, they were actually optimistic, right? They viewed this continent as a place for Christians to build, to grow, to have a future.
What an interesting point.
I don't know.
I've never thought of that before.
We've got a little buffering going on.
Dispensationalism, for those who haven't followed it, is normally criticized and defended because of its interpretation of what biblical Israel is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a super electric topic, both
very
theologically and politically.
Absolutely.
That's an understatement.
People get utterly hysterical about it and start calling you names or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's that. But you're saying that a deeper problem with it is that it makes people pessimistic.
Yeah.
Can you flesh it out a little bit?
Yeah. So I think if you go your entire life believing that any minute the world is going to come to an end, that I'm going to float up into heaven and my clothes will be here and everything we're gone. It's done. It's over. Right. Well, that takes a people that ordinarily are very low time preference, that build things for the future, that delay gratification, all of those kinds of things, and it flips it around and makes them very high time preference, where it's like, well, if the world's not going to be around tomorrow, why invest in anything for today? And you can even see this in terms of architecture, right? You think of the buildings that churches have, well, they're in strip malls, or they're they're kind of
garbage.
ugly.
It's garbage.
Yeah. And you look at the buildings that...
It's like a former pet store in the strip mall.
Yeah. And you look at the buildings that Christians had before this was the dominant theology, and they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. And there were very poor people that made them, like you said earlier.
I know.
And it's like that right there, like you see it tangibly, that... and you think about that in terms of all of life.
That is so smart. And what was the phrase you used? Low time preference?
Yeah, low time preference.
What does
so it's
that
like an
mean?
economic phrase, right? So, right, your preference in terms of time.
Please respect my ignorance.
Yes. It just means that you're going to wait longer for things. It's sort of like the marshmallow test with little kids, right? Where the one where like in 5 minutes you'll get 2 marshmallows, or you can eat this one right now, right? Well, the child that says, "Oh, I'll wait, I want 2," right? Well, he's going to go on and have more success and so forth, versus the one that immediately grabs the one and eats it, right? Well, that's low time preference. It's a people that will delay gratification, who will save and invest and build things for the long term, for the future.
And for future generations.
Yes.
That plant oak trees.
Yes.
Who plants oak trees?
Yeah, so the idea, just kind of jumping in here, being that if your eschatology is like, well, when this one global event happens, we're not going to be here, which is a predominant. A lot of people believe that, and I respect a lot of people that do believe that. it's just kind of like what they're saying, not investing for the future, not planting oak trees, and I think I've never actually heard the comparison with the architecture, but I think that checks out as well. Looking at the past, what they didn't camp out on, I wish they would have camped down on just a little bit more, is what the settlers of America, what their eschatology actually was, and it did not resemble the predominant evangelical eschatology today of dispensationalism.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to in Tennessee. We want to bring back the American chestnut in Tennessee. We want to bring that back.
Are you putting in evergreens, please?
Oh, I think everything. Yeah, I mean, there's pines.
Well, they grow faster.
Please don't neglect the pine.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I know it's a fast-growing tree, relatively speaking, but it's
beautiful.
It's the answer. And cedars, if you can, if you have water.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able. I mean,
well,
there are some cedars.
Okay.
Yeah, now we're going to get into
since you're a preacher and Old Testament scholar, what was the inside of the temple clad with?
Cedar. Yeah, from Lebanon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
God Himself said cedar.
That's right. Yeah.
An accident? He was pretty specific about it.
Yeah. It smells great.
So maybe there's a reason my sauna has cedar on the inside.
That's right.
Just think tell my kids that.
Just think of it like the temple.
It's my cedar church. Yes.
That's right.
No sacrifices, however. Well, here's something that you do.
Sorry, I'm going to skip past
specious theological elements.
Here we go.
Which,
Sorry, we had to skip past a little built-in ad there, but I understand why they put it there. Because this is the
obviously it does
interesting part of the conversation.
The whole theology was like laid out in the end notes. It's not actually in the Bible.
No,
it's like interpretation in the version of the Bible.
John Nelson Darby and Cyrus Schofield, and there's. I mean, they'll claim that they're antecedents from the early church. Like, well, this guy believed in something like the rapture, and it's like, well, it's always very, like you said, specious.
That's my read as a non-theologian, but it does seem incredibly silly, but sincere. So
people, exactly. People sincerely believe it. So
100%.
Mock them.
A lot of people I really like and respect believe.
Yes.
So I just want to say that. But you're saying that the cost is even deeper because it changes your worldview and makes it very difficult for you to engage in the labor of, like, for example, loving people around you and building something beautiful, which are also Christian imperatives. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. And it also, so it forces you into an immediacy, right? We got to do everything right now because there isn't going to be a future. Right?
Yes.
There's not going to be. I mean, and I heard this all the time growing up. Well, we're not going to be around. We're going to be raptured. So why plan for the future? Why build things for the future? Why
heard that growing up?
This was
100%. I have heard that my entire life.
This was just everywhere in evangelicalism.
Did you grow up in that?
Yeah. I did, and I remember in college when I was first getting into more historical theology, or thinking like, what did people believe before the 19th century about things? and it's
for
like,
the first 1800 years.
Yeah. What did they? Well, there were various different eschatological schools. Like there's all sorts of different views of how the end works. But when I first get into that, I'm thinking like, I don't know if I actually believe in the rapture. And I remember being in college and in campus ministry and telling people this. I'm like, I don't know if I actually believe in that. I mean, it was like I just uttered the greatest heresy of all.
Now, I'm going to take some liberty here, but what I think when he says he doesn't believe in the rapture, I don't believe Isker's saying he doesn't believe that when Christ returns, the people here alive don't meet him in the air. I think the modern interpretation of the rapture is that there's this it's like a halfway return of Christ where the church is raptured and put in heaven, and then there's a lot of other end time stuff that goes on. That's what he's talking about. I would imagine his interpretation of meeting Christ in the air is Christ doesn't go back. Christ is essentially assembling a procession as he comes and descends to the earth. People meet him in the air as Christ, very much like a victorious general would come back into a city after winning a war, after winning a great battle, after, in this case has been a cosmic war that's gone on since the beginning of time, and Christ returns and people line up behind him as he comes and returns to judge. I'm assuming that he would agree with that. That's my interpretation anyway.
All time. Like I could have said, I probably could have said, well, just denied the Trinity or something, right? And they would have been like, oh, well, that's interesting. But saying, I don't think there's a rapture. What? Are you serious? Right? Like that is central doctrine to many Christians. And it has this deep, emotional connection. Because, I mean, if you've grown up your entire life hearing this, and it's just assumed by everybody, right? It's hard to break out of that, even though the everybody of the historic church of millions or billions of Christians, right? It's actually a tiny minority in the history of the church that has believed that, but presently it's a majority of evangelicals.
Yeah, it seems like that theology is dying. That's just my sense, but I'd be the last to really know.
No, I think your instincts are correct. I think some of it is, some of it too, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, right after Israel is formalized as a state in 1948. Well, that gives like big confirmation that, okay, things are happening. Like there's an Israel in Revelation and a temple in Revelation. So it's happening, guys. So we've got 40 years, right? 1988, that's the end. Well, then that doesn't happen. And then people make all sorts of other guesses.
Oh, I wasn't even aware of that. So the idea was 1988 's the end of the world?
40 years after 1948, right? That's when the rapture is coming. That was I think there was a book like 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988, right? And I'm sure it sold a lot of copies, and then, of course, didn't happen.
Wow.
But
Mike Dukakis lost.
Yes.
No, I mean, that's not obvious.
I mean, I'm sure there were people, kind of jumping in here, I'm sure there were people who were, convinced that the end of the world was happening back during Y2K. Do you remember all of that? And everybody getting ready. By the way, before we go any further, this part of the program brought to you by Curable Premium Health. Curable's great CBD products that can help fight inflammation. We'll tell you more about them here, those great products here in just a moment. Back to this fascinating discussion, getting out to millions, 2.7 million views at the moment of this broadcast, talking about different eschatological beliefs and what the church generally believed for the first 1,800 years versus this very small blip on the radar where dispensationalism is the predominant American view of the end times.
Obviously the rapture, but whatever, we'll take it.
For people in Massachusetts, maybe it was, but it's just so interesting because like I look at it like you look at Matthew 24, right? That's the big text that people point to. And
what does it say?
Where Jesus says, well, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in various places and plagues and things like that. But right before it, right, well, Jesus is in the temple and he's fighting with the chief priests and he's telling them, he's fighting with them at Passover. So thousands of people surrounding them. He's embarrassing them in the temple. And
his boldness is really shocking.
Yes.
To people who haven't read it before.
Yes.
The rage that he displays at the leadership is just like it's
nothing else.
It comes right off the page.
And which is so ironic because you see evangelicals who are like, you need to be more Christ-like, right? You need to be, which means like wimpy and weak and inoffensive.
Sweeping into the temple and knocking over tables and driving people out with a whip.
And then going into the temple and giving this parable, right, where of the vineyard, right? He's like, first I sent this servant, you beat him and stoned him, and then you killed another one. Well, I'll send my son. They'll respect him. And then it's the heir, right? If we kill him, we could take the vineyard for ourselves, right? And yes, what's he going to do to these people? Well, he's going to come and he's going to destroy all of them. And it's like, and they knew. Right. The hilarious thing, I think, like reading the Gospels is, right, Jesus is giving parables, and the point of the parables is actually to conceal what he's saying. And people are like, whoa, what's that? Even his own disciples are like, what's that about? I don't really know. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But he's telling parables to the chief priests and the Pharisees and all the leaders of Israel, and they're like, oh, that's about us.
I think it says they understood it was about them.
They knew.
And they decided to kill him.
Yeah. So the parables are like obscure to everybody else, but when it's about them, like, oh, he's talking about us, right? But
talk about speaking truth to power. I mean, I don't know how that Jesus was kept for me as a lifelong churchgoer. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, may I interject that Tucker is an Episcopalian, and Episcopalian, part of the mainline American denominations that went woke before woke was a common phrase that we all understand. So the theological liberalism that took hold in the early 20th century, these people, like Episcopalians, like Northern Presbyterians, where we start wanting a cultural seat at the table because the rise of science and nobody wants to affirm the miraculous in the Bible. People tried to separate Christ from the historical Christ from the supernatural. Of course, when you try to do that, when you separate the supernatural from the historical Jesus, you actually eliminate the historical Jesus. And these took hold, things like not wanting to have to say, well, the virgin birth it wasn't really a virgin. There are all these things that were taking place that took hold of our American Protestant denominations, and it was all about not really wanting to believe in what the Bible says, not believing in the sufficiency of Scripture, which is why this version of Jesus that you would see written was kept from him, because they weren't too keen on the other biblical ideas. And so I'm just speculating here, but that's how he went to church all of his life and never was taught what the Scripture says about who Jesus is, was, and what he did when he was here. That's just my speculation, but I think that's correct.
Yeah.
But you just read it. I would recommend everyone read it, non-Christians alike.
But he's there. He's right there. And especially the Gospel of Matthew. I love it because it is...
But Mark, too.
Yeah, all four. I mean, obviously all four of them, but like Matthew in particular is so cool to me because like you read it and the way it's organized is Jesus is recapitulating the entire history of Israel, right? So right in the very beginning, he goes out into the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, right? Just like Israel's in the wilderness for 40 years, right? Is tempted by Satan. He comes, right, after he crosses is baptized in the Jordan, is like crossing the Red Sea, goes into the wilderness. Then after that, right, he's preaching a sermon on a mountain, expounding the law, which is Moses on Sinai, right? And after this, he's telling parables of the kingdom, like he's David or like he's Solomon, writing Proverbs, writing Psalms, and then he begins all of these excoriations of the high priesthood and the Pharisees and all the leaders of Israel. Well, what's that like? It's like the prophets, right? So he's reliving the whole history of Israel in his lifetime. What's Matthew doing there? What's the Holy Spirit doing there? It's showing that Jesus is Israel, right? He's the true Israel, right? He is as the Apostle Paul says, he's the chosen seed of Abraham, right? He's the one that carries out Israel's mission, which is, to dovetail. I'm kind of doing the weave too, like doing the weave.
It's Trumpian.
It is. People. I mean, when I'm preaching, people are like, "Andrew, you're doing the weave like President Trump." And
I try not Trump. It's interesting.
I try not to do the hand motions and things like him too. But we all have our own rhetorical style. It's interesting because, right, like the whole dispensational thing where it's like, okay, right, the old covenant still somehow sort of exists, and there's still this, this distinction between Jew and Gentile out there. Well, like the whole New Testament talks about this, that no, right, that separation that existed in the old covenant, right, they're brought together as one in Jesus, who is the true Israel, the successful Israel, the Israel that's obedient and goes to the death and is vindicated by being resurrected, right? And that old covenant, it's done. It's over, right? Those distinctions between Jew and Gentile, they're gone.
It says that only about 1,000 times in every book of the New Testament. So to come to the opposite conclusion does make you sort of wonder, like, have you read it?
Yeah, and exactly, and
whether you believe it or not, but that's just not what it says at all.
Yeah, and so you think about that, and it's like, okay, these two are brought together. I mean, the whole book of Acts is about this, right? That the Holy Spirit not only goes to the apostles and the Jews in Jerusalem, But the Gentiles get it too. Like Peter goes to Cornelius and he believes, and now here is this Roman, right? This Gentile. And the interesting thing about that too is there's this misconception that the only people in the Old Testament that believed in God were Jews. But it's like everywhere they go, there are these Gentile God-fearers that believe in God. And Cornelius is one of them in the New Testament.
Well, it's all through the New Testament. And in fact, Jesus calls out repeatedly Gentiles as the most faithful. Repeatedly.
Yes.
The Roman officer.
Yes. Yes. Again, like, I mean, he says this in the Gospels. Like he's talking about, right, the faithless and adulterous generation, right? He's talking about Israel. And right, he's saying in the resurrection, right, Sodom and Gomorrah and Tyre and Sidon, they'll rise, right? Sodom destroyed for trying to rape angels. They will rise up in judgment on this generation, because if the things that I'm doing, right, if the Son of God appeared to them and preached to them, they would have repented, right?
It's an incredible podcast. I highly recommend that you listen to the whole thing, because we're almost out of time here. They're about to get into Jonah and the sign of Jonah, and how the sign of Jonah didn't just mean Jonah being in the belly of the fish for 3 days, Christ in the ground for 3 days, that it actually has to do with judgment prophesied in the book of Deuteronomy that Jonah would have been aware of. So that's fascinating. We're not going to be able to get to it. But as I see this in data points, I just think, first of all, glory to God for this, one of the most popular show in the world, talking about the Bible, talking about really it's just the Bible itself, the Word of God, is inexhaustible. And this is a great thing that's getting out there. But I see this in data points. Tucker Carlson, his journey, being a truth teller, leaving Fox News, coming out. I don't know if you remember, but last year he came out and gave an interview that where he had a spiritual experience, or I guess what he described it as being attacked by a demonic entity, and the evil that was on display there caused him to run to his Bible and open it up and start reading. And ever since then, at public engagements, Tucker Carlson, going on the campaign trail for Trump and everything else, he's talked about how we as human beings are being acted upon by outside forces, and that's very much true. Even the good forces, and that's God in His sovereignty. And I just look at the data points here that have led to somebody like Andrew Isker, who's the Boniface option on X, if you want to follow him, at the Boniface option or at Boniface option, coming on his show and, now I think telling something that hasn't really been told, a view of Christian history that hasn't been told in a very, very long time. And I'm totally here for it. That's what I'm trying to say here. I'm totally here for it, and certainly a white pill day for us here on the Millstone Report. Before we go any further, folks, I want to tell you about Curable Premium Health and Curable CBD. The folks at Curable, let me just say this. You can buy CBD at a gas station, but you shouldn't, okay? The folks at Curable, they plant the seed, they harvest the hemp, they extract the hemp, they control the entire process, and they extract, the CBD from the hemp. And then they get a third-party lab to test everything. They don't use pesticides. This is quality CBD, and you're not going to find the level 2,000 milligrams, this active muscle cream for the price point. And it works, ladies and gentlemen. I can tell you that it works to relieve your pain. The other day I had a stomach ache, and I used it on that, and it worked. They also have their new CBD gummies that they have added melatonin to. So not only do you get 10 milligrams of CBD, you also get another 3 of melatonin. You got to check this out, folks. This is a great way to get great sleep as well as soothe your aches and pains. Also check out the CBD tinctures that are for internal inflammation. You should get it right now from curable.com. That's Kuribl.com, Kuribl.com, and use promo code Paul20, and when you do, you will save 20%. That's curable.com. Use promo code Paul20. And that is all the time that we have for this edition of the Millstone Report. unless I'm providentially hindered. I'm going to be back here tomorrow delivering you the news as I see it. And there is a slight risk of severe thunderstorms where I'm at. So say a prayer for all of us that are going to be facing, all of us in the South that are going to be facing this. If the weather is bad, obviously I won't be here, but I don't think it's supposed to move in until after my show. But say a prayer for those that are facing tornadoes, that the Lord would protect us because we don't want to get blown away. That's all the time that we have. So until next time, I will see you. God bless everybody out there watching.
The very foundation of the Christian faith is based